Welcome to the Solutions to the Free LawPrep. We've been studying the logical reasoning section. In today's video, we will look at analogy-based questions. These questions test your ability to identify the similarity between patterns of reasoning. Let us proceed and have a look at these questions. Right, so the question statement reads, which one of the following displays a pattern of reasoning most similar to the one used in the argument above? So basically here above you have an argument, and this argument has a certain kind of pattern. Okay, and then you are to look at the options and see as to which of these shows the pattern similar to the one that you see in the argument above. It's an interesting type of question. Pause the video and try solving it yourself, and then we'll go for it together. So when you read a piece of text, particularly an argument, you can read this for content. For example, here you could read this for saying that, hey, the name is Miss Singh. Then she talks about an employer, about relocated abroad, husband, salary, all of these. These are the content of the argument, okay? The other thing that you can read the argument for is structure, particularly in this question. Although it's necessary in all questions of the LSAT to understand structure, particularly here, the structure is paramount, okay? When you identify the structure, you will realize that you don't have to focus so much on the content, okay? You are here to focus on only the pattern, because the correct answer may have the same pattern but may have completely different content. So maybe it may not talk about someone relocating, etc. It could be something totally different. Therefore, identify the structure without getting into the content. You may want to pause the video now and try to think of the structure by yourself before we go ahead. So let us work towards getting the structure together. You can see here that it says that Miss Singh will relocate abroad only if her employer either agrees to increase her salary or to pay for her husband to accompany her, which means that she will relocate if either her employer increases her salary or if it is paid for her husband to accompany her. Okay, it goes on to say, but her employer has offered her a salary equivalent to the one she is currently receiving, which means that, hey, the offer that is made to her is that there's no increase in the salary, and the employer also refuses to pay Mr. Singh's way, which means that it also refuses to pay for the husband. And then you have the final line that says that hence, therefore, Miss Singh will not relocate. So this is kind of like the conclusion. Okay. Let's look at the structure of this now by getting rid of the content. Like I said, when you're focusing on content, when you're focusing on structure, content takes a backseat. Let's do that here and see what it looks like. So now we focus on the pattern and not so much on the content. So instead of calling it relocating abroad, I just call it an event, because it could be any kind of event since we're looking at the pattern. The event occurs if A happens and if B happens, right? Because you can see here that it talks about either this or this. So she needs either A to happen or B to happen. So the event occurs if either A or B happen. But what happens is that the given situation here is that you have not A, because you can see here that there is no increase, right? There's no increase in her salary. And then you can see that there's not B. And the conclusion is that therefore the event does not occur. So you have the structure of the argument in place, that the event occurs if either this or this. What we find is that neither this nor this. Therefore, the event does not happen. Once you have this clarity, you'd find the answer pretty easy to pick. There you go. Try to pick the right answer, pause the video and do it by yourself first. Okay, here's the answer. Look at option E. You can see that this is the only option that gives you the structure that we saw a little while ago. You may want to pause the video and think about it for a while, and then you can go ahead to the next question. The question says, the pattern of reasoning in the doctor's argument is most similar to that in which one of the following, which means that what you see above is an argument of a doctor. Okay, so you have an argument here, and it follows a certain pattern, okay, a certain pattern of reasoning, and then you are to see as to which one of these options is most similar to the pattern of reasoning that the doctor has adopted in the argument above. Pause the video, try solving it yourself, and then we'll go for it together. Right. So toxemia, a condition that can affect pregnant women, is associated in its mildest form with rapid weight gain. Important word. It says associated with rapid weight gain. Let's move ahead. It says in the past, although the causes of toxemia were unknown. Okay, so the causes were unknown. Goes on to say that doctors argued. Remember what the question statement was? It's about the pattern of reasoning used by the doctor. So now what the doctor argues is really important. Okay, like I said, read actively. Okay, it says the doctors argued that pregnant women should limit their weight gain because weight gain can be controlled and it might be one cause of toxemia. Okay, so what do we have here? It says that toxemia can affect pregnant women and that it is associated with rapid weight gain. It goes on to say in the second sentence that the causes of toxemia were unknown, yet, despite not knowing the cause, doctors argued or doctors reasoned that pregnant women should limit their weight gain because, weight gain could be a possible cause of toxemia. Okay. Now, the very important thing that you should understand here is that a simple or a mere association between two things is not the same as causation. These are very different. Causation means that if this happens, then this will definitely happen. It's like saying if there is rapid weight gain, there will be toxemia. That is causation. Okay, or that toxemia causes it. But an association is not as clear a relationship as causation. Okay. Now, in such a scenario, you know that the advice of the doctor or the reasoning of the doctor is based on the association rather than the causation, right? So the association is the basis for avoiding the result, which basically means that a possible cause, right, has been stated as the reason for avoiding something, right? So now you've understood mainly the pattern of reasoning here. Let us go ahead and look at the options. So the pattern that you see here is basically that it first talks about an association between two things. It does not use the word causation. It tells you that there is no known cause or there's no relationship of causation between these two entities. But then it also tells you that treating this association as a basis, something is denied or something is prohibited. Okay. Now, once you've understood this, picking the right answer is not hard at all. You may want to pause the video and try seeing it by yourself. Okay, let me give you the answer now. The answer is A. If you go through option A, you can see that it's exactly the same in terms of its pattern when you look at the passage here. There are a couple of points that I'd like to tell you. The first is I wish to highlight how easy it is when you know what you're looking for once you've gone through this. If you didn't, you'd have to go through each of the options, and then each option, when you're reading it, looks enticing in its own way. Therefore, you could get misled. The second thing is that particularly when you have options as large as these, you see, reading these options is not easy. Okay, you can't afford to waste time going through each of these. Now, let's say when we looked at this argument here, okay, studying and understanding this argument together in this video took us around 2 minutes maybe. If you do that by yourself, maybe it might take you 45 seconds or 50 seconds, but that's a lot of time. Okay. Each of these options, 5 options here, also presents an argument like the one that you see here. So assuming that understanding this took us maybe 40 seconds, understanding each of these would take 40 seconds, right? So you can't afford to spend those 40 seconds. Once you know what you're looking for, you should be able to pick your answer maybe within just 15 to 20 seconds, right? So try to devote the bulk of your time to first understanding the requirement of the question by reading the question statement. I can't emphasize how important it is for you to first look at the question statement. So the one that is in bold and which I am now presently highlighting. This is the thing that you should look at this in the beginning. Okay. Once you've seen this, you know where you're going. Then you look at the paragraph that's given to you. Spend some time on that, okay? And once you're convinced that you've understood it, then you know what you're looking for. And then quickly glance through the options. So you skim through the options and pick the answer that appeals to you. Right? Let's move ahead. Right, so we're down to the last question of this video on analogy-based logical reasoning problems. The question statement here is slightly different. It reads, which one of the following arguments exhibits a flaw in reasoning that is most similar to the flaw exhibited by the argument above? Which means that there's a flaw in the argument here, right? And you are to see as to what the nature of that flaw is. And then you are to pick from the options the argument that has a flaw that is similar, right? So you're looking not for a similar argument necessarily, but you're specifically looking at a flaw that is similar. Okay, let's move ahead after you've given it an attempt. Okay, pause the video, try it by yourself, and then we'll go for it together. Right. So the prominent astrophysicist, Professor Haridas, never stated that there are other planets inhabited by intelligent beings. Therefore, that means we found our conclusion. Because you see the word therefore. It says, therefore, we may count Professor Haridas as a prominent scientist who rejects the hypothesis that there is intelligence on other planets. Now, in this question, particularly because we are focusing more on the pattern, I will not talk so much about the content. Okay, so let's look at the structure. Professor H, let's make it simple. Professor H never said that there is something, right? Let's just call this X, right? Never said that there are other planets, and let's just call that X. Okay, so Professor Haridas never said that there is X. Okay, and then the conclusion follows. It says that therefore, so you have the conclusion that therefore H rejects that there is X, right? So he says that we may count H as a prominent scientist who rejects the hypothesis that there is this thing, right? So it says that we may count Haridas as someone who rejects that there is X. Now, what is the flaw in this? Okay, the flaw is that he never said that there is X. So if he never said, it means that he neither accepted nor rejected, right? So this is the mistake. The mistake here is that when he's neither accepted nor rejected, how has the conclusion been arrived at that he has rejected it? Okay, so silence, his not having said anything, was treated as a rejection, and this is the flaw. So now when you're looking for the options, let your attention first be to find the option that reflects a similar flaw, and a plus point would be if you can also find a similar structure of the overall argument. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the options. So when you're trying to understand structure, we kind of not think so much about the content. So while I can kind of say that, you know, he could have either accepted or rejected, a simpler way or a more general way of saying this is that silence on one of two alternatives was treated as a choice of the other. So like, for example, there were two options here. He did not say this, so they believed that it was this, right? Or another way of saying it is that not saying X was treated as saying not X. Okay, once you've understood this, picking the right answer is really easy. You may want to pause the video and try it yourself, and I'll give you the answer in a couple of seconds. Okay, here's the answer. The answer is option C. As you can see very clearly, it says Lalji, who follows horse racing closely, has not said to me or anyone else, that means he was silent, that his friend's horse will win. It follows that Lalji believes that the horse will not win. So not saying X was treated as saying not X. You can see exactly the same pattern of a flaw in this argument, right? So I hope this lesson was useful. Thank you. Right, interesting question statement. It says, which one of the following judgments most closely conforms to the principle expressed above? Which means that what you have here above is a principle. And what you have here are 5 judgments. Out of these, one most closely conforms, which means most closely is in consonance, is according to the principle given here. So you are to pick which one that judgment is. Try it yourself and then we'll go for it together. Before I actually get into the details of solving the question, I'd like to point out that there's something unusual about this question. Now, typically, when you have a logical reasoning problem, you would expect that this part before the question statement is kind of longer and that the options take a smaller part of the page. Whereas here, you can see that these options are really large, the principle not so much. And this size can be quite intimidating. So that's why let me give you a tip. When the options are difficult looking, when they are large, they are likely to be very simple. What that means is that once you understand what you need to do, you don't require to read these in too much detail, because the typical question in the LSAT India requires you to solve it within around 80 seconds or so. So it's not going to make you read so much, okay? You should have that confidence when you approach it. Right. So in this question, you have difficult looking options and a simple looking principle. Let us read this together to see how simple it actually is. It reads, one should not believe a report that a particular event occurred if the probability of that report being false is greater than the probability independent of any considerations introduced by the report itself of the event occurring. Well, not simple at all. Now, what do you do when you get something that looks difficult? Do you just jump to the next question? No. If this were the exam as such, maybe you could have done that. But when you're practicing, and if you have even as little as maybe a week left in your preparation or even 5 days, I would advise you to spend time on this to try to understand what's happening here. You might have felt that you understood nothing at all. But that is not the case. We've definitely understood something. First, let us get an idea of what we have been able to understand. If you look at the entire sentence, let me black out some of it so that you can see what you've understood. Let us say I black out this part that looks kind of difficult. Okay, there you go. Have you not been able to understand the first part that says that one should not believe a report that a particular event occurred if blah 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 blah. That's something you understood. It says that let's say there's an event, okay, and there is a report of that event. It says do not believe the report that this event occurred if something else. Okay, now let's go ahead and see what that is. It says if the probability of that report being false, okay, do not believe it if the probability of that report being false, I think this is easy to understand, is greater than the probability independent of any considerations independent of any considerations introduced by the report itself of the event occurring. So what it says is that let's say you have this report, okay, and this report gives you some details about an event. So this report basically contains some considerations which relate to the event, okay. This is what is spoken of here. Considerations introduced by the report itself. Let us say these are the considerations introduced by the report. Now it kind of talks of something being some probability being greater than some other probability. Let's kind of write this down so that we give ourselves some structure. So you have the probability of something being greater than the probability of something else. We know this. So what is the first probability that we're speaking of? It talks about the probability of the falsehood of the report. It said the probability that the report is false is greater than the probability of the event independent of considerations in the report, which means that if you ignore what is given in this report, if you ignore what the report itself says, okay, so let us say there's a report and the chance of that thing being false is maybe 10%. So they say there's a 10% chance that the report is false, okay, and then you look at the probability of the event aside of all these considerations given in here. So let us say for an event there might be many things that might cause you to believe that an event happened. Maybe, let's say one thing is the report, that's one source. Maybe there was one person who actually saw it. Maybe there was some little camera somewhere that actually uh, took a footage of this. Let us say the probability that you get of the event happening by judging all of this is 20%. Okay, then it seems that the probability of the event having happened is there, because the probability of the event aside of the considerations given here is more than this. But let us say if this probability based on these other things was maybe only 5%. Okay, so based on the other narratives, there's a 5% probability of that happening. Now look at this. It says that the chance that the event happened aside of this report is 5%, and the chance of this report being false is 10%. Hey, in such a scenario, it says do not believe this report about this event, because you see the probability of the event is so low and the probability of the falsehood of this report is so high, so don't believe it. This is what you get in this principle. Not the easiest of things to understand, but that's what it is. Let us move ahead. Right. Don't forget what I told you a little while back about these options. These look big, but you don't need to get into the details of all of these if you know what you're looking for based on the principle. So when I'm saying it's simple, it means that you need to stick to the basics. In the principle, you can see things like a report, you can see probability, you can see something being false, and then it says that you should not believe, right? That's what happens here. You should not believe, that's the conclusion, so you should have one such thing. And then it talks about report, probability, falsehood, etc. Look at the options and see if you can find an option that kind of resembles this. And then we look at this in some more detail. You know what? Given how simple this is, if you just glance through the options, you'd find the answer immediately. If you look at option E, you can see that it conforms to all of the check boxes that I'd given you, the basics. Let's read this in some detail now. It says, Hema reads in the newspaper that her number is the winning number in a lottery. Okay, so this is the report of an event. What is the event? The event is that her number is the winning number, and the newspaper is that report. And then goes on to say the probability of the newspaper being mistaken is 1 in 10,000. So the probability of falsehood, like we saw, is 1 in 10,000. And then it says the probability of her number being the winning number is 1 in 10 lakhs. Okay, so 1 in 10 lakhs is the probability of the event. Okay, so as you can see, 1 by 10,000 is greater than 1 by 10 lakhs. If you don't understand this much maths, well, it's a little hard for you, and I told you how you can get away with that even without getting into this maths, but I'm just telling this to you right now. You know that if a larger number is in the denominator, it means it's a smaller number, right? So here you can see that Hema should not believe in this newspaper report because the probability of the falsehood is greater than the probability independent of the considerations in the report. I hope you understood that. Let's go ahead.